and welcome everyone. I'm Christine Fisher, your host of today's edition of Cape-Ann ARTWaves, coming to you by way of 1623 Studios located in Gloucester, Massachusetts. My fellow co-producer, Jacqueline Guillam-DeFalco, will be your host next time. Our show honestly is not possible without our 2021 sponsors. They are Prince Insurance Agency, MK Fisher Visual Artist, the McDermott McCarthy team at Gibson Sotheby International Realty, Common Crow, and our partner C-Arts in 1623 Studios. We're actively inviting new business sponsors to join our team in 2022. We're edging on having interviewed 50 guests, approaching 12,000 views with great engagement on social media. So please contact 1623 Studios directly and we'll be happy to follow up. The beauty and rich artistic legacy of Cape-Ann and Gloucester in particular has provided the spark for so many creatives who have been thriving here for generations. Our program takes delight in shining a spotlight on our artists, gallerists, and today the director of the Cape-Ann Museum, Oliver Barker. I think of the museum, CAM, as the crown jewel of Cape-Ann with a reach that extends internationally. I'm an active champion, and I know that many of you are as well. The museum will soon celebrate its 150th anniversary in 2025 and has never been more relevant than today, where the arts play a great role with its capacity to engage, heal, and inspire. I should add that Gloucester will be celebrating its 400th anniversary in 2023. As a community, we are so fortunate to have this diverse, rich, cultural institution in our backyard and led by someone so talented, educated, and committed to the preservation and engagement of arts and culture. With deep family ties and affection for Cape-Ann, it might come as a surprise to some that Oliver, in addition to having earned his master's in arts and cultural management from the University of Melbourne in Australia, graduated from the Melbourne Institute of Technology with a double degree in printmaking, painting, earning his Bachelor of Arts before continuing on at the Institute, graduating with first-class honors and an honors degree in painting. Oliver's distinctive work can be found in private collections here in the United States, as well as Australia, Italy, Germany, and the UK. What an impressive and distinguishing set of qualifications. After taking leadership roles with various notable cultural institutions, Oliver took up the helm of the Cape-Ann Museum in spring of 2019 and has had oversight for many exciting initiatives and the expansion of the Cape-Ann Museum Green, a very unique indoor-outdoor campus. Oliver's journey is an exciting one, and it will be a treat for all who are listening today. I appreciate how his early artistic education has informed his role as director of the beloved and highly regarded Cape-Ann Museum. Without stealing any more thunder, welcome, Oliver.
Well, I'm delighted. I feel very honored to be part of your the group of people you're interviewing. So thank you for the chance.
Oh, you bet, you bet. So let's get us started. Let's focus on your journey. You were so fortunate to grow up in a family where arts mattered. And your parents are both artists and they're still practicing today. Talk to us. Let's use this as a jumping off point.
Yeah, that's a great place to begin. I certainly grew up in a very nurturing household. My parents were both educators, they're now retired, and were both practicing artists. And it was a very encouraging environment where we were invited to pursue any and all interests. In my case, it happened to be an artistic one as a painter and a printmaker. In the case of my brother, Alistair Barker, he is now a professional cellist. So music and the visual arts were a very strong part of our upbringing. And I was very inspired, I think, by my father as a sculptor. He now works predominantly in bronze, but also in ceramic, and makes a whole series of very wonderful pieces. I think for today's purposes, we're sharing a work that is called Awakening. It's a bronze work from 2010. If you look at that piece and imagine a whole house surrounded by objects like that, it was just a very wonderful and inspiring place in which to grow up. My mother is a multimedia artist, and for the purposes today, we're sharing an untitled work that she made using all manner of materials. My parents are both British in origin and moved to Australia before I was born. They have a wonderful sense of English country gardening, and their garden is a very important part of their lives. And you can certainly see the wonderful reproduction of that garden in my mother's work, which actually, when we look at some of my later paintings, that interest in color in the form of flowers very much stays true in my own work too. So that early influence of them both, and my parents and their devotion to the garden, is very apparent also in some of my own work.
Yes, well, that really comes through in your mother's piece. It's absolutely gorgeous. And your father's work is just so elegant, really elegant. So we have another piece, Oliver, that we'd like to talk about. I believe it's a piece that you did. It's Untitled. Talk to us.
It's Untitled. This is a work from when I was at university, and I wanted to include that today just to give people a context that growing up, I had great admiration for painters like Edward Hopper. And I loved the realism of Hopper's work and others, and felt that in order to be acknowledged as a talented artist, I should paint that same way. So at university, I was encouraged to sort of step outside of the box. The painting here features a trip that I made in the mid-1990s during a downtime one summer to Europe. And this shows a scene in Barcelona. And you can see the beginnings of my interest in abstraction that was starting to come through. And so I wanted just to include that as an example of where I began, and as sort of a starting off point for the later work that we'll talk about today.
Yes, I love it. Very Hopper-esque. And this is a perfect jumping off point. You mentioned Europe. You mentioned your stint in Europe. Let's talk about a very pivotal time in your life when you moved to Venice and began to work with the Peggy Guggenheim Museum. Talk to us about that. Yes,
it was a great privilege. I was invited to work at the Guggenheim Museum as an intern initially. And it was just a wonderful experience. There was no hardship, of course, to spend at that point 3 months in Venice as an amazing and inspirational city. And what I loved about the experience, of course, was that a bit like Gloucester, it's very place-based in terms of the city in Venice and here in Gloucester has been the catalyst for so much creative work and visual art as well. And so I loved the experience of being in Venice, and was very fortunate enough to be invited to join the Peggy Guggenheim Museum team, and ended up actually living there for almost 6 years. So during that time, I decided that I really wanted to make a body of work that was my response to the city. And interestingly enough, with the exception of just one painting, most of the work actually has no reference to the water. When you think about Venice as a city, it's a city that is delineated by the canals and the lagoon. But in actual fact, I chose to focus on those hidden elements, or not so hidden elements of the city, elements of beauty that perhaps go overlooked on as one experiences that city from day to day. For the purposes today, Christine, I wanted to share 2 paintings. One of them is called Composition 9, and it showcases the wisteria in May. For anyone who's been to Venice in early May, it is just the most amazing time to be there. You can smell the wisteria, and I wanted to create a work that captured that smell, but that color. And so that was my inspiration for Composition 9. And for Composition 10, looking at the actually Composition 12, I think it's called, and looking at the other end of the season, the fall, which is very beautiful as the foliage, of course, as here in New England, changes its tone. That painting juxtaposes some wonderful leaves against a bright blue sky. And it was just, as I say, those are 2 not so hidden elements, but certainly points to the interest in color and foliage that I experienced growing up in a wonderful home environment in Melbourne, Australia.
I love their abstraction and I love their precision. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that you're working with oil on linen, correct? For both of those.
That is correct. That is my preferred medium. We touched briefly, you very generously mentioned my work as a printmaker in the introduction. And while I was at art school, I made a lot of etchings, but particularly a lot of lithographs. I love the lithographic process of sanding down the limestone and creating prints. I always found that I never quite got what I wanted through the printing process. And so transitioned to working in oil on linen. I just love those materials. They're traditional materials, and so all of my painted work uses both oil paint now, and the base, of course, is linen versus canvas.
Well, they're beautiful and they're just so precise.
Yes,
So Oliver, before we talk more about your evolution as an artist, is there anything more that you want to add regarding your stint in Venice? You were so fortunate that you traveled quite a bit with your family and you went to other museums in various countries, and you just had this wonderful immersive, if you will, in culture.
Yes, and I was fortunate enough, given the fact that we had family in the UK, whenever it was possible to travel and visit them and other places nearby in Europe. So I've always had the opportunity to visit museums, and certainly felt very inspired to be in those creative spaces. And what I think is interesting as we think about what I do now is that I will admit that my own painting has taken a backseat role. For me, the motivating factor is to be around the arts and to give other artists that opportunity to celebrate their voice. And I think about my painting all the time. I've got a long list. I actually, in preparation for this call, Christine, I came across a whole list of files that I've been keeping of future visual ideas. And it sort of sparked an interest there. I thought I'll go up to my attic in the easel and maybe I'll try and do something again. So I'm always thinking about my own work, but as I say, at the moment, for all good reason, the priority is working here for the Cape Ann Museum and pushing the agenda of the museum forward for this community.
Yes, of course, of course. Let's talk a little bit more before we dive into the museum and what it's like to lead the Cape Ann Museum through these uncertain times, the pandemic. I would like to talk a little bit more about the evolution of your art. So we started out with your foundation more Hopper-esque. Talk to us about how it evolved from there.
So interesting enough, and this coincides with an opportunity that came my way in 2002. I was invited by the director of the ARTWaves Foundation to come and use one of two residential studios that they had at that time in Bethany, Connecticut, just outside of New Haven. And I was given the chance for 3 solid months to just do my own work. And so with that in mind, I took on perhaps a behemoth of a project, and that was to create a painting that I have called Tavalo Pedue. It was completed in 2003, and it's a massive canvas of 70 by 120 inches. And it's made up of a whole series of hexagonal shapes. This was based on a photograph that I had taken looking as I was walking one night in one of the back streets in Venice to source my material for my painting. I came across the back entrance to a restaurant over which there was a window over which plastic film had been placed, so you couldn't see what was happening behind the window. And I happened to pass just at that moment when the flames were hitting the pan, and there was this sudden burst of orange, which happens to be a favorite color. There was this wonderful burst of color. So I captured that and decided that given the very tedious nature of my work, the very exacting nature of wanting to replicate these patterns and how the light would change them, I devoted 3 months to really just executing that one painting. A second work that I produced during that time, which is somewhat nostalgic, is a work that's called 1900 Cafe Settecento cene, which translates as 1,900 coffees, 700 dinners. And what this painting represents is the side of the matchbox that I used each night as I would prepare my coffee and also my evening meal. And as I was packing up my things to head towards this residency in Connecticut, I looked at the matchbox and I thought, well, there's a unique pattern there that only I have made, and that should be celebrated in the course of a painting. So, those were two works that came out of that residency, and from there, I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Albers Foundation, and I did continue my work leading up to an exhibition of my Venice paintings that took place in Melbourne in 2008, which was called Venice Unlocked. Mm-hmm. And I had about 15 paintings in total, that some of which had been made in Venice and were FedExed from Venice to Connecticut and then FedExed on to Melbourne. But it was a wonderful opportunity to put myself forward in a professional context in a gallery in the gallery district of Flinders Lane in Melbourne, Australia. And I did produce a catalogue to go along with the show. And it was just a very exciting time to—
I have it right here, Oliver. I have it right here. Beautiful catalog. I feel so fortunate to have a copy. Thank you.
Oh, of course. And so it was a wonderful way of professionalizing my own work as an artist, in a very exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, indeed. And talk to us now about how all of this has helped to inform what you're doing today for the Cape Ann Museum. And honestly, you know, you picked up the reins in the spring of 2019. Nobody could have predicted what happened. I mean, honestly, talk about baptism by fire.
It has been an interesting time. It's almost been 3 years now. Actually, April next year will be the 3-year mark. And I had the good fortune of joining what is obviously a wonderful institution, has been stewarded by my predecessor, Rhonda Falloon, and others in amazing ways. And the museum has really been in the process of continuing to open ourselves up to this community. And so during my short time here at the helm, we've really tried to accentuate that. I'm excited. I think that's where the new campus, the Cape Ann Museum Green, and I'm going to hold up a report here that the museum has just released, that really features the very important role that the Cape Ann Museum Green and our new James Centre building is already playing in terms of our outreach to this community. So it's been a very exciting time. Of course, many of you may have enjoyed, I hope, the Winslow Homer exhibition of 2019, where we had almost 30,000 visitors who came during the 18-week run of the show. And so certainly no one, as you say, Christine, could have anticipated our enforced closure last year for 6 months. But it has provided the museum with a great opportunity to innovate. And we've done so, and when we think about my role as an artist and the role in which contemporary art has played in bringing to life our new campus in particular, we've had a number of projects that I'll point to. One, in the midst of the pandemic, very early on when we were all in lockdown, we worked with Stephanie Benenson, who created a wonderful message of hope to thank our frontline heroes for all the work they were doing to keep us safe. And it was a message that was projected on the side of the 17th century barn that is right there at the Rotary at the front end of the Cape Ann Museum Green campus. And one of the exciting things we did is we invited the community to join us for a road rally on one evening, where we all went by in our vehicles, safe, socially distanced, very appropriate. And as we went past the installation and the projection of this phrase, thanking our frontline heroes in the 4 main languages spoken here in Gloucester, we invited everyone to sound their horns or make some noise in support of our heroes. And so I mentioned that as a great way in which I believe we can use art to convene the community, and in the case of that project, to bring people together and initiate the beginning of the healing process. Earlier this year, the museum, I think, quite effectively utilized that campus again and called on contemporary art in the form of an installation around the COVID memorial, COVID-19 memorial in March of this year, we had a wonderful virtual presentation and a projection on the building that honoured the people that unfortunately have been lost in the greater area of Essex County due to the pandemic. And so it's another great example of the way in which that beautiful open space that we have can be really used to invite the community, as I say, to convene around art and ideas, and in the case of those two projects, to begin what is an important healing process
Yes.
for us all.
Yes, yes, indeed. I have to say before we move on that I had the pleasure of being part of your flotilla, your cultural flotilla. I mean, how unique was that? 70 boats, correct?
Yes, exactly. So that was another project we had last summer, which we'll be repeating again this coming summer in 2022. We call it our CAM Culture Cruise. Gloucester Harbour, I think, is America's most painted harbour. And so we wanted to take people outside and invite them to enjoy the harbour and hear the stories of the people and the artists that have been inspired by this particular place. That's the one very exciting thing, or one of a number of exciting things that the museum has to offer, that we have the place. So when we had the Winslow Homer show in 2019, you were literally able to walk outside the door and see some of those same scenes that in 1873 inspired Winslow Homer to pick up his paintbrush and commence work in watercolors. It all happened here. And so our culture cruise, and I'm so delighted that you were part of that, Christine, really was trying to bring people together, again, in a safely social distance appropriate way to celebrate this place.
Well, it was fantastic. It was so experimental, I have to say. I really appreciated how brave the museum was for doing it, for undertaking it. It was such a novel idea. I loved it.
Well, we had so much fun. And as I say, we're doing it again. So please join us all next year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the heads up. Speaking of a heads up, let's talk about what's new, what's coming down the pike for the Cape Ann Museum.
Again, well, from an artistic point of view, some of you hopefully have enjoyed in these last month or so our community portraits exhibition at the Janet and William Ellery James Centre at the Cape Ann Museum Green. And that's a wonderful initiative that actually commenced before COVID and morphed in all sorts of wonderful and important ways as we extended the project to invite all members of the community to submit their portraits. That exhibition has been on view now and actually will be closing at the end of this week, but it features 650 community portraits. I made one myself. I will admit my drawing skills were a little rusty, but I still had a lot of fun. And we're going to continue to use that space to bring the community together. Our next project there will be an initiative working with all 8th graders across the Cape Ann area schools. And it's going to be a project called Sculpting Self. And it's inspired by the work of Walker Hancock. Here in opposite our auditorium, there's a wonderful display case filled with about 30 figurines, small statues that Hancock made, predominantly of basketballers. There's a wrestler or two in there too. And so we're going to be inviting our 8th graders to sculpt themselves doing their most favorite activity. And then next year, actually bring those sculptures by our 8th graders together with Hancock's images inside the museum. So that's an exciting thing that's coming up. I will share that just a few weeks ago, we installed our first contemporary sculpture at the Cape Ann Museum Green Campus. It's a work by Aris Demetrius, a wonderful piece. I hope you all have a chance to see it. We ultimately will be installing that campus as a sculpture park over time. And we are delighted because of Aris's obvious very deep connections to this place with his mother, Virginia Lee Burton, and father, George Demetrius. It was very opportune that the first piece be by Aris. And so we hope in the years to come, there'll be many new exciting works of contemporary art to see at the new campus too.
Oh gosh, this is so exciting, Oliver. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I have to say, you bring so much energy and passion to the role. You're such a talent, and we are so fortunate to have you at the helm of the Cape Ann Museum during these times. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm very flattered and very honored. It's a privilege for me each and every day to serve this community and the wonderful legacy that we all have. It's amazing to me that the Cape Ann Museum has been here for 146 years. And to your earlier point, we'll be celebrating our 150th anniversary in 2025. That's a huge milestone.
It's a huge milestone, yes.
And it's a wonderful story. I, as I say, have the privilege of spearheading and moving the museum forward during this particular time, but I can only do so because of the work of all of my predecessors and this community that has made this institution such a vital one.
Yes, beautifully said, beautifully said. Well, I want to thank you again for this rich and wonderful conversation. And I want to thank our sponsors for continuing with your generosity to support Cape Ann ARTWaves. For those who would like to access this recording in the future, please check 1623 Studios social media platform on their website. I also have a slide behind me that's indicating exactly where you can find our program. I want to thank Steve Lacey and Pat Verga for their contribution of the music. I also want to thank Anders Johnson, who makes us all look good. Thank you, Anders. Thank you, Oliver Barker, Director of the Cape Ann Museum. I'm Christine Fisher. Thank you all for watching.
Thanks, Christine. Take care, everyone.